Every day in America, approximately 22 veterans, first responders, or crime victims commit suicide. Get involved in offering solutions to the men and women who so bravely take an oath to protect and serve the lives of Americans. Now, a word from our sponsors and then our host.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is Crisis in America, PTSD. Today is our first show with myself and co-host Sean Flynn and special guest Colonel Mike Brown. And Sean and I are going to talk all about some of the issues that are concerning PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, let me tell you a little bit about it. PTSD is a mental health problem that some people develop after experiencing or witnessing a life-threatening event like combat, a natural disaster, a car accident, or sexual assault. It's normal to have upsetting memories, feel on edge, or have trouble sleeping after this type of event. If it's been longer than a few months and you're still having problems, you may have PTSD for sure. But for some people, the symptoms may start on later, or they may come and go over time. Our goal is to bring awareness to veterans and first responders who suffer with PTSD. We hope to do 52 shows this year, stepping out on faith to do so. Colonel, first and then Sean, could you tell us in 5 to 10 sentences each your goal for the show?
With the return of over 2.7 million veterans from Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and other recent, oftentimes multiple war zone deployments, America's solemn responsibility is to care for our returning heroes in a more important mission than ever. Regrettably, the suicide crisis that has endured and markedly increased in our veterans community over the past decade stands as a stark reminder that we must redouble our efforts to address continued gaps in our veterans' care. Crisis in America, PTSD, and Veteran Suicides podcast will address this. On this series, we have talked frequently about nonprofit organizations out there providing medical care for our returning veterans and our service members. One of those that I really support out there is the Wounded Warrior Project. I want to give them a shout out today. To get in touch with the Wounded Warrior Project, their web address is www.woundedwarriorproject.org. Again, woundedwarriorproject.org. Again, woundedwarriorproject.org.
Thank you, guys. My intention for the next 52 weeks is to sincerely share my strength, hope, and experience as a former first responder on the front line in the United States of America, to share my strength, hope, and experience for those out there that might be listening that need help. I lost my career from the debilitating disease of PTS, which led into a life that became unmanageable, that led to chemical dependency, that led to traumas that I had no comprehension going through. So my intention for the next 52 weeks is if there is a first responder out there, whether it's a military veteran, a fireman, a police officer, or anyone, just like when I was prepared to go on a 911 call, any suffering soul out there, my intention is to share my story and share the actions that I get to now take each and every single day to help others. And I'm grateful to be a part of this podcast, and I look forward to those that will reach out and possibly relate and have the courage to reach out. And also, finally, for those agencies out there that are listening, that are having issues with their employees when it comes to post-traumatic stress, when it comes to chemical dependency and some other disorders that are a common result of these types of careers. I look forward to being a part of the process of changing the narrative and changing the paradigm and being a part of a new Afteraction plan that is going to be more useful to those that serve because they deserve it. It's the fair thing to do. And the truth is that my most sincere intention from this podcast is to not get anything. It's to share so that any suffering soul out there, to include civilians, to include our first responders, can live free inside of their spirit, happy, joyous, and free. That's my most sincere intention. It's not to be on this podcast and to hear myself talk. My most sincere intention, be of service again, just like I was in the beginning when I signed up and took the oath to save lives. So I will share and I will stick to the truth that there's really nothing here for me to get other than my own freedom and other than my own sincere truth, so that others who reach out can possibly find a way to get through this debilitating struggle that we go through as first responders. And thank you very much, everybody.
Now, Sean, you are a person who has suffered PTSD, and you're my co-host, and I want you to tell the audience a little bit who develops PTSD.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you, Colonel Mike Brown, my dear friend, Colonel Mike Brown. The team's back together. To answer your question, Susie, PTSD does not discriminate, okay? This show, Crisis in America, PTSD, I get to be here on this show with you guys and with Colonel Michael Brown because the crisis in America is real. PTSD does not discriminate, but we're here again to talk about the truth about what's going on in America and how we can best not just serve the veterans and serve the first responders, but also how to best serve any suffering soul. Once again, as we always do, Susie, again, we're in a field training environment. I'm grateful here to be here, to be able to share. Grateful that we have an experienced colonel from the United States Army here. And today I'd like to start with this word called intention. Intention. Our intention on PTSD first responders, PTSD crisis in America, we're talking about first responders, we're talking about America. Our intention is to carry the message, carry facts, speak from our experience. And number one, the primary purpose is for anyone out there suffering to reach out. And we as a team here, along with everybody that we're in contact with, all we want to do is help save lives. So I want to turn this over to Colonel Mike Brown. And again, when I talk about intention, okay, that is something that's important for us in our recovery, because my intention when I first became a first responder was to save lives. I was of sound mind, okay? That's my intention here today. The truth is that we get to be free here in America. This freedom, I will not take for granted. And for those out there listening, Colonel Mike Brown's about to share, because the freedoms that we have here to have the show here, Susie, that is something that I am grateful for. And I have to personally remember how grateful I am, because the truth is I get to be an American here today. I get to be free and get to get back to my true intention when I first joined the police force and I took that oath. And that intention was not for the paycheck. That intention was to be helpful and to be useful. I think it's important when I turn it over to Colonel Mike Brown that we understand this word intention, because what we're really trying to do for even the listeners out there, whether that listener is that suffering soul that we're targeting, but also those that are having trouble to relate, those out there that care, and they might have something that we call affluence and influence. Because the truth is, if we're going to start making a dent in this epidemic of veterans dying every 65 minutes, 22 a day, with the numbers rising, I would like to talk about intention, because it's not our intent on this show to complain and be victims. It's not our intent on this show to blame our government. Okay, it's not our intent on this show to blame the police departments, the fire departments, and all these different departments that deal with first responders, to include the VA. Our intention here today is to hopefully resonate with anyone and anybody that would like to get behind this effort so that we can start going a little bit deeper and actually putting a dent in the crisis out there. Because the truth of the matter is, and I don't have the numbers for first responders, I know Mike has the numbers for veterans. PTSD is real. It's an invisible wounding. Careers are going down the tubes. Guys are out there, men and women are out there that put themselves out there to save others, are suffering from a real invisible wounding, which over time leads to a slow perpetual death. It leads to suicide. It leads to the families that get traumatized and don't understand this invisible wounding. So I'm grateful, and I always say that because I will never forget, as Mike Brown said, that I get to be an American today because of the intention of our founding father who founded this country so that we could have freedom. And that intention was sincere. It was real and it was good. And that's why we have the freedoms that we have. And the Colonel Mike Browns and all the young men and women out there on the front line in the military that take an oath to protect our freedoms are important. And those first responders on the home front that are out there that take that oath and they're of sound mind when they join and they go out and they take on what they take on, okay, for the sacrifice, it's important. It's only fair. It's only the right thing to do. That all listeners out there, again, our intention is to somehow find ways collectively so that we can start emerging with the medical research and the spiritual research so that lives could be saved. Colonel Mike Brown, great to have you. Please take me from there.
Well, another great show. I love the spirit. And we're here today to talk about just exactly what you've articulated, Sean and Susie, and that's PTSD, American Crisis and Veteran Suicides. And I'm here today with great teammates. And here I'll get started. Try to address with you, Susie, quick in the difference between what we're going through today on the civilian side, but most importantly, why we're here today with the PTSD on the veteran side. And you're right, PTSD is a lot different on the uniform side than it is on the civilian side, and I'll get into that while you're preparing the questions for me today. I'm a true American. I retired United States Army. I served for over 30 years to this great nation. Love this country. I love everything about it. I love our veterans. I love our warriors. I love our active duty members that are out there. And what I really love to do is just to carry on the care that the great Americans out there deserve for everyone. I'm a proud member. I'm a family member. I care for the families that are out there that are suffering. I've been doing veteran work since 2016 after I retired. I've been involved with the Mission Continues program as an intern. I've been involved with a home-based program as an intern, helping veterans and their families aftercare as they transition back onto the civilian world. I've been involved in the Mass General Hospital programs for veterans. I've been a hospice volunteer for veterans down in Maryland. I've also been involved with writing a book. I started a venture writing a book called A Knife Fight in Satan's Hell, a true story on moral injury. And it's a book that's going to be published sometime in the end of 2020, and it will explain to the very things that we're talking about on this program. So been 30 years, 5 wars, served in Bosnia and Kosovo as well. I've seen many things that most people don't want to see, and I'm here to share that with you here on this show.
Colonel, let me ask you something. There are some common facts that are available for people to understand how many people are actually dealing with this crisis. I do think it's important that they understand some of the basic facts based on the U.S. population, so you can tell our audience how many people are suffering, if you will.
So specifically on the veteran side of the house, Sean alluded to that earlier, but it's the gross numbers are, since 2008, tracking the suicides amongst veterans, we are nearly over 66,000 veterans over the last 12 years have committed suicide. That's a huge number. If you average that out, that's greater than 6,100, 6,200 per year. And that number is rising. In fact, last year in 2019, in September and August of the latter, the Navy in September actually shut down their services as a shutdown day to address this very issue. So we have a staggering number out there that's going to top, based on projection, this year. We are going to have over 70,000 veterans that have committed suicide on the return back from the wars that we have participated in, not just in Iraq and Afghanistan, although those are the popular wars that we've come back from. But we're talking Bosnia and Kosovo, the first Gulf War, and even those from Vietnam. So those are the big staggering numbers that are out there today.
Now, there are various symptoms, and Sean, you can jump right in as well. And you, Colonel Brown, by all means, let us know what some of the symptoms are, because everybody's different. On the other hand, the symptoms seem to be actually, should I say, similar for a lot of people?
I would start off by saying this, and you asked about this earlier. PTSD is witnessing or experiencing trauma, an event like death, injury, or even a possible death or threat of injury to someone that's close to you or even yourself. So what happens with that? So behind every feeling of anger, there is an underlying hurt. So anger is the key one. And when we get angry, when something we can't tolerate is present or something that we need is absent, either way, the reason we're angry is because we're hurt inside. However, many of us were socialized not to feel or express our anger. So we push it down and inward. As you know, anger turned inward becomes depression. So depression is another symptom. Now we refuse to feel our anger, and chances are we don't want to feel our hurt either. So we cut ourselves off from the uncomfortable felt experience as well. That becomes isolation. That's another symptom. And since we're not feeling our hurt or our anger or our emotional energy, that is bouncing back and forth internally within inside of us. And all that emotional energy bouncing back and forth, what do you think that's called? Anxiety. So that's another symptom. And you put those things together and all of it's bottled inside. And the next thing you got typically is substance abuse. So now you got depression, you got anxiety, and you got isolation, and now you're using substance to numb the pain, to numb the anger, and those are your symptoms. PTSD alive and well inside of a vet.
Sean, did you experience this as well? When I listened to you, and you've told me many things about PTSD and your experience with it, but I'm curious, and I want our audience to really understand that whatever Colonel Brown said now is reality, and probably you experienced this, and I want you to tell our audience how you felt when you were suffering.
Thank you, Susie. The Colonel just answered that question in a way that was so in-depth, and I can completely relate. See, as a former first responder, and what you go through every day at the end of a 911 call and at the end of many years of experiencing the things that don't fit, which is repetitive death, which is the hurt, the pain, which is being under attack. Also, as a result of the oath that we took, we're in the resistance. And that's just the nature of the careers that we took on. We took an oath and we were trained up, and we then go 10-8. We go into service and we're in the resistance. And that resistance includes all of those things that Mike described even in shows previous, which is we see things on a repetitive basis that are not necessarily normal on a regular basis to those that might have other professions. You know, today I would like to say this. Mike Brown and I have recovered from PTS, and we continue to address our PTS, and we continue to recover by doing exactly what we did when we took an oath. We do it in service. And I'd like the listeners to understand too that, you know, after Colonel Mike Brown answered those questions and described what we go through, we are not hopeless. Mike said in a previous show, this shouldn't be treated as a place of hopelessness. This should be treated as a place of growth. And so I'm grateful to be able to share today and talk about the truth and be bold. But at the same time, I think it's important for those listeners out there to understand that Sean Flynn, a former first responder, took a sincere oath and was of sound mind, today gets to share about this. But I don't want anyone to be necessarily confused. When you are able to recover from this and continually practice the actions that we take and do the therapies that we have done before, we become more valuable. That's what I'm talking about here. I want people to understand that Colonel Mike Brown and the Sean Flynns and those that have recovered are valuable. So this is where I'm talking about this place of growth. So I think it's important for people to hear that, because this topic is scary for a lot of people. There's a lack of compassion. There's a lack of understanding out there. And again, to describe my version of PTS, and I know we have a limited amount of time, Mike Brown summed it up. Okay, it's an invisible wounding. Now, how do we recover from that? And I'll share today sincerely. We recover by going back in service and helping others. And that's what we're doing here today. So Susie, I'll let you fire away with the questions, but I think it's important that our audience understand that those that have suffered from PTS as a result of the careers that they've chosen are not hopeless. Okay, it's important for people to understand that we are back in society and we are valuable. And the other thing is too, here's another truth I need to be able to express, or I'd like to be able to express, is that, see, Sean Flynn is a basic human being. So to go back to your first question, Susie, PTSD doesn't discriminate, not above or below anyone. But I want you to understand something, is that knowing that PTSD doesn't discriminate and sincerely sharing that I'm not above or below anyone, okay, I think it's important to get that out, because there's people out there listening right now that hopefully will help us find ways to better serve our veterans, to better serve those former first responders that are struggling, and to also get the leaders of these agencies out there and these individuals that have affluence and influence. And we're not after anything. What we're after a sincere intention to help address this issue so that we could be of better service to others. Now, how does that get done? That doesn't get done by us complaining and blaming. That gets done collectively through our intention to get the message out.
You know, Sean, getting better means different things for different people. There are many different treatment options for PTSD. For many people, these treatments can get rid of symptoms altogether. Others find that they have fewer symptoms or feel that their symptoms are less intense. Your symptoms do not have to interfere with your everyday activities, work, or relationships. I want to understand. Jump in, Colonel Brown. Is what I'm saying, does that make any sense, that every day you can do something different to make yourself better?
I think what is happening out there, and what Sean and I are talking about, and kind of relates to the first question we're trying to address on the show, is the clinical care that is being presented to the veterans, on the most part, is not prepared to handle a veteran or a uniformed police officer because of their unique events and experiences they're having on their own battlefield. And because of this, we are getting a lack of treatment, a lack of clinical care, either while we're in service or as we transition out of service. And the statistics prove this. And the congressional amount of money being placed in these services for the military and the Veterans Administration clearly articulated. And I would like to share those numbers with the audience, because we are not going to get to the root cause or corrective action unless we deliver that message first. Then we can come from the bottom up and address the question, is the treatment correct or not? Because the statistics will tell you today the treatment that we are provided, if we're getting the treatment, is the next question, because that is subject to debate now as well. See, this is the problem, Susie. It doesn't matter. We are taking a knee. Sean and I took a knee. The veterans and the men in uniform are taking a knee. The problem is the support structure around us is not feeding us the required demands of us. And that has to get addressed. So we can go into question one. We can at least address the audience at the national level and then feed this audience. Here's what's going on so they can make an impact at their local level, because that's really what's going on right now in America. I can't walk off the street and saying, yes, I can have a symptom. You can't take me through a prolonged exposure training and therapy when you don't know how to do prolonged exposure therapy for a man in uniform from Dade County, or a man who's been in Iraq or Afghanistan from a soldier's perspective. You haven't have a clue on that kind of therapy. And that's what we're seeing out there.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because many people talk about the treatments that are available for PTSD, such as psychotherapy, which or counseling, which involves meeting with therapists, trauma-focused psychotherapy, which focuses on the memory of a traumatic event or its meaning, cognitive processing therapy, CPT they call it, and prolonged exposure, PE, and eye movement desensitization or reprocessing, EMDR. Look at all these different treatments that they're saying, but you tell us whether they're effective and whether you've used them and you would recommend it, because a lot of the unfortunate people who come home with PTS from battlegrounds or first responders, many of them don't know what to do and don't know whether this is an effective treatment. So tell our audience, if you will, and both you and Sean can actually address this, because both of you have gone through this.
If you look at what Congress has as funding on suicide prevention programs, and those programs are exactly what you talked about: prolonged exposure, cognitive processing therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, EMDR, and many more for the military community. Just from 2013 to 2019, Congress has appropriated over $1 billion for suicide prevention programs in this area. And this is important. So let me share with you the results of this $1 billion investment and how it worked out. These are people that went through those programs, Susie. This is, again, according to VA, and this is the most national report that went to Congress. And this is a Congress back in May of 2019. There's a subcommittee, because they're frustrated too, as Sean said at the beginning. We want answers. Billions of dollars are being poured into these programs, these treatments. And here's your result. Taxpayers, listen to me out there. These are your taxpayer dollars. And you tell me if you want to invest another $1 billion in these kind of programs that Susie has mentioned. From 2008 to 2016, more than 6,000 veterans died by suicide. Between 2005 and 2016, the suicide for veterans rose from 23.9 to 30.1 suicides per 100,000. The suicide rate for veterans between the ages of 18 and 34 rose by almost 80% from 2005 to 2016. There's your treatment. According to the RAND Corporation, between 2008 and 2016, get this, the suicide rate amongst active duty service members for all branches of the armed forces increased from 16.3 to 21.1 per 100,000. And this is a stunning fact. This is about treatment when you come off active duty. This is about being lost in the system. And when you get out, there is no treatment. If there is treatment, the ones you're talking about ain't working. A recent study found the risk of suicide nearly doubles in the first year after separating from active duty service. Maybe the treatments are well studied. They're not well applied.
There's something that's called an after-action plan, okay? We go into action in our careers, okay? We go through. Right now, the after-action plans, from what Colonel Mike Brown is saying, for the VA, okay, and also right now for the first responders agencies, the after-action plan, there's not one in place. And there's not one in place for these agencies for the first responders. So let me have the floor here for a minute. Those out there listening, sheriffs, heads of departments, chiefs of fire departments, okay, medical units, trauma units, we need to start creating a safe after action environment for first responders. Okay, now the current situation is, this is Sean Flynn's experience. This is what's going on currently right now. I get to work now as a result of these shows. I get to work with guys that are suffering. They reach out because I've been able to get my life back. I've been able to recover. Okay, but here's what's not in place. The agencies, somehow collectively, we need to create a safe environment, a safe after action process. So when a first responder like Sean Flynn goes in, doesn't know what's going on, but asks for help. Okay, what's happening now is that a first responder gets sent to an outside contracting doctor. Okay, the department detaches from that first responder, hands them over to a trained medical professional that, and God bless him, knows what he knows about the medical side of things. But yet here's the truth. That doctor is being paid by the agency, okay, to protect the agency. The suffering employee, the suffering veteran, the suffering first responder now, we're trained up to not, we're hypervigilant. Here's the thing. We have moral injuries as a result of the careers that we took on to protect the Susan Brenders of the world, all of these individuals. See, here's the thing. There's a lot of fear going on here, and you have an injured patient, you have an injured employee, and we need to create an environment in conjunction with trained medical professionals and in conjunction with a peer-to-peer recovered first responder, okay, that they will trust, so that they will start to open up, so that the healing can start, so they can know that they're not going to be abandoned by the military, by the VA, so they can be re-indoctrinated back into society. Because here's the thing. We have real wounds, and I'll tell you why we have real wounds. We started off of sound mind, and we took an oath, and we decided to sacrifice and take on a career to sacrifice. Now, as time goes on, we become injured in the resistance. There becomes moral injuries because you know why? Because in our professions, we're under attack, and we have to resist, and we have to do things not because we're of ill intentions. It's because it's our job. So that means that we have to hit back. We have to do something that's called a use of control. I'm not here to describe what that means. We have to execute these duties, and we have to actually fight back in order to protect the citizens of the United States of America and the different counties that we serve. What has to start happening is that we need to be re-indoctrinated safely in an environment with medical professionals that understand the depth of the moral injury and the need for us to feel safe, be able to open up, to be able to confess what's going on. See, if we don't start thinking about this new paradigm of making a safe environment attached or supported by our agencies to where we can go to process this trauma, to where we're not feeling like we're abandoned or we're going to lose our jobs, okay? The problem is going to reoccur over and over again. See, we need safety, because I appreciate your questions, but this show is not to, we've talked enough about what PTSD is, and I could sit here and tell you stories of things that I've been through and that I've done. And I'm going to tell you this, everybody out there listening, I'm not some hero. I'm a human being. I'm a human being that was a police officer in the streets of America. By the grace of God, my career did not have anything in my file, thankfully, to where I could be ashamed of it. But let me tell you the truth. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm one of the lucky ones because you know how my career ended? It didn't end in a decision to where I was fired for my actions, because my intentions are to serve and to help and to save lives. I lost my job because I reached out and I got sent home into a non-safe environment to an outside contracting doctor, God bless him. Okay. But Mike Brown is talking about the need for us to be safe in our healing so that we can keep our jobs and we can heal. And then guess what happens? We come back even better than ever before, a place of growth. First responders that recover, warriors that recover from PTS and get through it and then start getting back into service, we become more valuable than we ever were when we were in uniform going out there protecting the United States citizens and protecting the citizens of the counties and the cities that we serve. That's the truth. But the problem is that we get labeled as damaged goods. Everybody's scared that, oh my gosh, HR sees this guy's got an issue with PTSD, which led to chemical dependency. And guess what? We get left alone. It's not fair. The fair thing to do, as Mike Brown has explained, the fair thing to do is that we start talking about this, and be patient with me, Susie, because we got to get to the crux. We got to talk about how even those out there that are listening right now that might have a hard time relating. Let me confess something. I'm a basic human being, and I will confess this. I'm not a perfect human being. What happened in the resistance of my career over time of getting hurt and being in the resistance and getting attacked is I started to hit back. And then I got the PTS. And then guess what? I started to do things that were not of my moral character. That's a fact. Okay, I'm not out here to act like I'm holier than thou, that I'm better than anybody else. I got hurt. Thank God that every single evaluation I have in my career and my file is something I get to be proud of. But the truth is, if I didn't raise my hand and get the proper help, I could have ended up in prison. I could have ended up dead. I could have ended up committing suicide. These are real things. I am not better than anyone else. But what I'm saying is this, and I'm going to let Mike finish because this is important. What needs to start happening is the after-action plan in place for us. We need folks out there that have an intention that's pure, that have compassion, that appreciate and respect and have gratefulness for those that chose these professions. We're not better than, but guess what? We need those smart people out there, to include doctors, to include people that have the ability to create, that to make decisions governmentally, leaders of agencies. We need them to start going a little bit deeper and looking at their inner intention of, wait a minute, this is a problem. Are we going to really do something about it? And now start reaching out to guys like Colonel Mike Brown and to guys like Sean Flynn. And again, I say that humbly because in conjunction with the medical professionals, it's warriors that save warriors. And some of those medical professionals could use some of our insight, maybe go out there with us to learn how we're doing it to recover, so that when the time comes that we have to raise our hand, that there's more compassion and they're not looking to just protect the entity, okay, and label us as damaged goods and leave us hanging. It's not fair. Mike Brown, take over.
Well stated. Soldier, police officer, airman, Marine. You all hear what he said out there? My goodness, that was from the heart. For those that are sick and suffering, if you need someone to turn to, you take this guy's number on the end of the show. My goodness. Thank you, Sean. You know, one of the things we have to do better, and this show is also about solutions, as Sean stated in the beginning, because, you know, we're not pointing fingers at any one person. Make sure that's clear out there. We're not here to be the catch-all that we know everything, because we don't. We're still learning. We want to learn from our mistakes and not repeat them like we have been for the last 12 years. We don't want 2008 and 2020 to look like 2000 to be the same thing that looks like the next 12 years. We want change. In the beginning of that show that we just talked about, Sean was talking about, you know, lessons learned. Just a little while ago in the beginning of the show, he talked about solutions, and I'm talking about solution. And this is out to the service secretaries of the DOD. This is out to the Secretary of Defense. You know, you're really tying the president's hands. You know, back in March 5th of 2019, he signed an executive order for suicide prevention. 2019, March 5th. Here we are, over a year later. Numbers are still rising. $1 billion shot. You know, Mr. President is a strong-willed man, and he needs results. For the service secretaries out there, you're letting your active duty members get off the station and go back home broken. And I want to paint you a little scenario. Private Joe's coming home from active duty. He served you for 4 years. Iraq and Afghanistan. He ends up in Sandusky, Ohio, in a Greyhound bus, and his mom and dad pick him up. Mom and dad take him home. He gets a hero's welcome just like everybody else does. For the next 90 days, Private has nothing else to do but drink. He has PTSD. And that's all he's been doing is drinking. His parents are worried. There's no local care for him. While he's into his substance abuse issues and PTSD, Sergeant Steve's on his way back after a 10-year tour. He's coming back to the same Greyhound bus in Sandusky, Ohio. His parents pick him up. So does his wife and 2 kids. He learned a little bit about PTSD. His wife says she's not going to have anything what's going on with the other private. They have issues, marital issues, relationship issues. He starts drinking. Next thing you know, Steve and the private link up. And one day the private doesn't show up. The news flash comes on the TV at the tavern. They find the private floating in the river. The private jumped off the bridge in Port Clinton, Ohio. They found him floating in the Portage River. He's committed suicide. Just another statistic of 22 a day. Mayor comes up on the TV screen. Says they got to do something about suicide. He's got to do something about returning vets. He has no local resources. Closest one's 2 hours away. This is a story, America. 66,000 times over the last 12 years. Pushing 70,000 this year. You think this is fictional? It may be. But for the rest of 66,000 families that are out there that had their life shattered, sons and daughters not coming home, committing suicide, let me talk to you about this. And I'll quote Governor Cuomo, why we're not having a good transition from active duty to the home local towns. If you remember Governor Cuomo in the beginning of the pandemic from New York, he's the state governor there. His words were so echo still in my head. Test, test, test. Why are they not testing 100% of our combat veterans for PTSD and more injury at least 18 months before they come home from the service? One of the most important aspects of suicide prevention among service members and veterans is ensuring ongoing access to mental health care for service members, particularly during the time of transition. Why are we not testing, just like Governor Cuomo did in New York? 100% testing. You can't tell me you can't test every vet before they get out of the service. When suicide risk can be higher, make sure service members have ongoing access to quality mental health care, specialized coaching, and assistance in finding a new mental health provider for active duty service members, National Guard members, reservists, and veterans. Have a program set up while on active duty that can be handed off to a mental and spiritual health provider when that military members are relocating to another assignment, returning from deployment, transitioning from active duty to reserve duty or vice versa, or they're preparing to leave military service, just like Private Joe and Sergeant Steve.
We're almost at the end of the show. I would like to end on a positive note. Is there something that you can tell our audience about that kind of gives them a little bit of hope? Jump in, Sean.
First responders out there listening, military veterans out there listening, Mike Brown and I are going to leave our phone numbers in our emails. Here's the good news. Primary purpose. Mike Brown and I get to live a free life today. We are free. And we have healed. We have healed from everything we're talking about. We have healed from the PTS, and we continue to heal every day by doing this, leaving our phone numbers, okay? For you guys that are out there listening, give us a call. Here's the thing. Also, agencies out there, anybody in charge in government institutions and the sheriff's offices out there of the world and the police agencies, here's the good news. The good news is that you don't have to continue to live in the perpetual hell that you might be living in. There is a way out. That's the good news. So reach out, okay? Reach out. You save our lives because really right now, my intention is not to have my voice heard on this podcast so I could get attention, or I could care less about how many likes we get or dislikes. My intention is you gentlemen and women, reach out. And if there is anyone out there that hears this also that might not be suffering from PTSD, but is in a position to start being creative to actually help us save first responders in conjunction with the medical community, reach out to us as well. Because I know that as leaders of these different agencies, you're getting tired of what's happening to the men and women when they're doing so great for so long. Then all of a sudden we're reading about them in the newspaper because they're no longer with us, or because they're in front of a termination review board and you don't know what's going on, but you're getting to recycle the same problem over and over. So what I'm saying is, the good news is, number one, brothers and sisters on the front line that are afraid to reach out, I understand. I've been there. The old narrative, the old way of sending us to the EAP and all that, which is all good. I'm not bashing it. We're trying to change that. And those leaders of agencies, let's start creating some peer-to-peer, if not collective institutions out there, to where we can safely let the employees know and the veterans know you can reach out, and we're gonna help you if you reach out early enough, and we're gonna also guide you through what you have to go through to heal from the invisible wounding. Okay, and guess what? That's the after-action plan that I'm talking about. So the good news is, here's the good news, Susie. The good news is that this was a great show. And the good news is, I can guarantee you one thing, because it's already started to happen. As a result of our 6 previous shows, Mike Brown and I have been reached out to by our brothers and sisters on the front line, to include civilians and family members. Guess what? PTSD doesn't discriminate. We're not here to make ourselves mutually exclusive from the rest of the world. What we're doing is we're talking about an epidemic that's real. And when you reach out and help us, you get us back. Guess what? We get to be of better service to the Susie Brenders, to everybody out there. See, that's the beauty of the spirit of a first responder. See, this is what has to be done. We got to stop talking about all the guts and the glory and start talking about solutions. Now, don't get me wrong. Hold on. Let's start talking about real action. Sean Flynn gets to speak today, but guess what? This is the lowest form of service for me. The highest form of service is going to be when that phone call comes in and I'm there to answer the phone and I'm there to do something about it. I'm there to actually put some skin in the game and start walking the talk. And that's what Colonel Mike Brown and Sean, Eugene, Flynn are all about. And that's what we're trying to get out to those in positions of affluence and influence. I know you care, and I understand the situation that you're in because you represent the institution. There's protocols in place. Guess what? We keep working together. We can start figuring out better ways to help guys before everything gets burned down. And I'll leave it at that. The good news is that, guys, we're here for you. Reach out.
Well, my co-host today has been Sean Flynn, and our guest has been Colonel Brown. And believe me, they're going to be back to talk about various issues concerning PTSD. And you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to help, because as you hear, it's necessary. I want to say thank you very much for both of you to participate in this show. I want to ask you, Sean, is there anything else that you want to end this show with?
Yeah, thank you again. Gratitude. I know you mentioned that one time, where I'm not going to ever forget that I get to be free today. I get to be free. I get to share on this podcast. I get to live in America today because of the sacrifice of those, going back to the intention of our founding fathers, which was sincere and it was pure. And it was just as pure as Mike Brown's intention when he joined the United States military, and just as pure as Sean Flynn's intention when he joined the police force. Hey, the good news is that I am grateful to be an American today.
We're going to pride ourselves on the show that we're fact-based, not opinion-based. If you need to get a hold of me, you can contact me at area code 256-783-9052. That's 256-783-9052.
Thanks, Colonel Mike. And my name is Sean Flynn. My phone number is 561-644-5451. And my email address is Flynn, that's FLYNN 9179 at AOL.com. S Flynn 9179 at AOL.com. Thank you very much.
Boy, what a great show. In his farewell speech to West Point, General Douglas MacArthur said, quote, "The soldiers above all others. Other people pray for peace, for he must suffer and bear the deepest wounds and scars for war." End of quote.
What else could be said? So thank you very much, gentlemen, for being on Crisis in America PTSD.
Thank you for listening to Crisis in America PTSD. All veterans, first responders, or potential guests, we would love to hear from you. Please email comments to Colonel Mike Brown. That's brown.mike734@gmail.com. Once again, brown.mike734@gmail.com.